everything we knew about Daggerheart until last week.
The game is called Daggerheart. It's a fun and fresh update to the fantasy genre of RPGs, and it's been designed for long-term campaign play and character progression. We've been working on it for a while, and we're super excited for you to check it out.
Hey, I'm Bob. This is where we learn how to have more fun playing RPGs together, and Critical Role's new RPG, Daggerheart, is a 2d12 system. Can you believe it? You know, they never said it was going to be a d20 system. Roll that clip.
If I had to guess, this is a D&D clone, and why wouldn't it be?
I mean, why wouldn't they? If they swap over to Daggerheart on their show, they will pull that Titanic audience with them.
So we don't even know for sure that it's a d20 system, but as someone said online, Critical Role's logo is a d20, so this is a pleasant surprise. Of course, you're still going to be rolling dice to beat a DC target number. You still have a character with a class and hit points and renamed versions of race, subclass, and the 6 core stats. But Daggerheart also has unique mechanics for dealing and reducing damage, boosting your allies' rolls, relying on cards rather than flipping through a rulebook, players adding to the narrative, and even permanent stat loss and player character death in a blaze of glory. That's right, no death saves. High fantasy, detailed character creation without making characters invincible superheroes? As Matt Mercer said, Daggerheart is truly going to be a fresh take on fantasy RPGs, and thanks to comicbook.com, we got a whole article breaking down everything about Daggerheart that was revealed last week at Gen Con. I'm going to share my perspective on it here, but the original article is linked in the description, where you'll also find a link to this video's sponsor, Gilman's Guide to Speed by Only Crits. Yes, the same folks who made the Bob World Builder metal dice set and many, many more awesome dice are launching their first big 5e sourcebook of high-speed arcane punk gameplay. New races, new classes and subclasses, new feats and backgrounds, spells, monsters, magic items, puzzles, riddles, and rules for building and racing your own vehicles turbocharged by magic. The book includes over 30 pre-made vehicles. You can get cards for the monsters and magic items, a GM screen, and of course, your choice of awesome dice, or go all digital with the VTT package. But be sure to back Gilman's Guide to Speed on Kickstarter in the first 48 hours to get a free set of dice in an exclusive dice bag. Just remember to use the link below so they know who sent you. Now, I'm going to be making parallels between Daggerheart and D&D because comparing and contrasting to something we already understand is the easiest way to learn something new. But Daggerheart really is doing something new here. Where D&D is a 1d20 roll high system with strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, Daggerheart is a 2d12 roll high system with strength, agility, precision, presence, intuition, and knowledge. So we can immediately see some obvious connections or overlaps between those stats, but what's really exciting, even though it's such a simple improvement, is that Daggerheart has dropped ability scores, leaving only the modifiers, so to speak. Rather than having a stat score of 16 and then translating that to a +3, you just have 3, for example. Daggerheart is by no means the first game to do this, but the reason that's so important is that it signals to us as players and game masters Critical Role's Darrington Press is not afraid to shed the vestigial elements of D&D that make it a little more complicated than it needs to be. The Daggerheart designers are ready to streamline and innovate. Another notable change, they said goodbye to the D20. This was kind of shocking because while the initial announcement never said it would use a D20, someone pointed out to me at the time, well, the Critical Role logo is a D20. So I don't think anyone expected 2d12. But what this means is we're now operating on a bell curve from 2 to 24, not nearly as tight as the curve of 2d6 powered by the Apocalypse systems, but not nearly as swingy as a 1d20 system. On each roll, you're still trying to beat a DC determined by the Game Master, but you're rolling with 1d12 representing hope and 1d12 representing fear and adding them together. As noted in the article, getting a 9 on the hope dice and a 7 on the fear dice is a 16 with hope, while a 7 on the hope dice and a 9 on the fear dice is a 16 with fear. Success with hope gets you some kind of benefit, while success with fear means there's still some kind of cost to your success, and failure is failure. Back to the article. Doubles on the D12s results in a critical success, which is a success with no negative consequences and usually a narrative bonus on the result. So we don't know exactly how this works yet. I dare you to count how many times I say that in this video, but if we take that literally, doubles on the D12s means getting 2 12s, 2 8s, or even 2 1s is a crit. And please check my math, but I think that means that you have a 1 in 12 chance of critting every time you roll, which would mean significantly more critical successes than we're used to in D&D. Back to hope and fear, the article says that rolling with hope during combat means the players retain initiative and a player character gets to go next. A roll with fear hands initiative back to the enemy characters and often comes with some sort of narrative consequence that the game master warns players about in advance. For instance, still quoting here, my rogue character made an agility check to run past one enemy to attack a more vulnerable foe. The roll was made with fear, so the enemy I ran by was able to attack me as I sprinted. This fluid form of initiative could be fun, or it could be confusing. If there's only one enemy and 5 PCs, but the PCs keep rolling with fear, does the one enemy get to keep attacking over and over? I'm sure there's a great answer to that because action economy is such a foundational element to these kinds of games, and just like D&D, there's probably certain classes or features that may allow your character to manipulate their initiative order. We just don't know yet. We do know that succeeding with hope also builds up hope points that can be spent to boost rolls. According to a video I found from someone else who got to playtest Daggerheart at Gen Con, linked below, you can spend 2 points to boost your own roll or 1 point to boost an ally's roll. Therefore, it is optimal to help your allies instead of yourself. Personally, I think building that sort of cooperation into the rules is awesome. If you agree, give this video a thumbs up. And how do you boost those rolls with hope points, you ask? By granting advantage. Daggerheart advantage means you add 1d6 to your roll, and of course, disadvantage means you subtract 1d6. Very simple. But with an average roll of 3.5, Daggerheart's version is a little less impactful than how the same mechanic works in 5e. However, we do not yet know if those extra d6s can stack up. My guess is that they can't by default, but some character features may allow it. We'll have to wait and see. So for a quick recap, Daggerheart is 2d12, roll high, with strength, agility, precision, presence, intuition, and knowledge. You roll against a DC set by the DM, and if your hope d12 is higher than your fear d12, you rolled with hope, or vice versa. Rolling with fear comes at a cost, and rolling with hope comes with a benefit, like earning a hope point. You can spend 2 hope points on yourself or 1 point on another player to grant advantage on a roll in the form of plus 1d6. Let me know down in the comments how that sounds to you while we shift gears from core mechanics into character creation. Then we'll touch on a couple rules we learned about combat, damage, and death. Like we mentioned earlier for the main stats, your character just has a few small numbers instead of big numbers that need to be translated into small numbers. The article states players have 4 points to spend across 6 different stats. However, this photo of the journalist character sheet makes it look like they added 2 points to agility and precision, but also got to take a -1 in knowledge and move that point to presence? Maybe? So we don't know exactly how that works yet, but Darrington Press is clearly going for a more balanced approach than rolling stats randomly, and this point-buy style also allows you to choose the stats you want in order to build your character's strengths and weaknesses the way you want. That kind of control and depth in character customization seems to be a big feature of the game, as we should expect from a group whose success largely comes from creating deeply fascinating characters.
Oh yeah, that hit the spot. Uh-oh. Alright, time to find my friends and save the world! Ooh!
Then, where D&D characters are built around race or species, background, class, subclass, and feats, Daggerheart characters are built around ancestry, community, class, subclass, and domains. Taking those from the top, ancestry is race just like it is in Pathfinder and Shadowdark. And so far, we know the ancestry options include Katari, straight from the character sheet. Those of Katari ancestry resemble a cat in humanoid form, typically recognized by their soft fur, large ears, and tail. With a feature called Feline Instincts, on any agility roll, you may mark a stress to re-roll your hope die. If you do, take the new roll instead. And that's the only ancestry shown in that article, but in that video I watched, they said there were also dwarves, stone giants, genasi, daemon as a tiefling equivalent, and turtlefolk. Now I'm guessing Daggerheart has its own names for stone giants, genasi, turtlefolk, and this is almost certainly an incomplete list because that creator also said there were no elves or humans available in their playtest. And a fantasy game without elves, humans, or any kind of little folk besides dwarves would be pretty inconceivable. What you may have also noticed is that the ancestry part of the character sheet is actually a card sitting on top of the sheet. This is fascinating to me. Zooming out, we can see this sheet is actually designed for a rogue, and then they have cards for their subclass, Rogue Nightwalker, their ancestry, Katari, and their community, Darkborn. And the author points out that this means there's zero flipping through rulebooks because everything you need to know about your ancestry or subclass or whatever is right on the card. Do these cards also mean Daggerheart is going to be sold more like a boxed board game than an RPG rulebook? Does this mean in the future they will release expansion packs of cards with new ancestries and subclasses rather than needing to print entirely new books? I don't know, but I'm excited to find out. As for this specific character's Darkborn community, the picture doesn't have enough pixels for me to decipher what its features are, and the other video didn't expand on community as far as I can tell. So we just don't know much about this yet, but it definitely seems like an analog for character background, occupation, profession, etc., by granting one or two cool features for your character. We also don't know about the other options for classes besides two named in the article, the Guardian and the Seraph. Like a paladin, I'm guessing? But I can tell you that the rogue has two starting moves called Cloak and Sneak Attack. Cloak says when you move into a location where no enemies can see you, you can cloak. Enemies can't target or see you even if they move into line of sight while you are cloaked. You are no longer cloaked after you move or attack. When you leave cloaked to make an attack, the roll has advantage. And Sneak Attack. If you have advantage on an attack roll or an ally is in melee with your target, always add a d8, I think, to your damage roll. When you use a sneak attack, you may also spend any number of hope before the attack roll, and if it is successful, also add a number of d8, I think, equal to the hope spent. So these rogue features are very similar to what we see in D&D or even Dungeon Crawl Classics, but they're solid. The cloak feature is very straightforward, you hide until you move or attack with advantage, and the sneak attack is cool because you can add even more dice if you have hope to spend, meaning your allies might be able to boost your damage on a sneak attack. Honestly, I don't know for sure if that's how it works, and I wonder if anyone's actually keeping track of how many times I say that, but that's probably how I would run it. More importantly, it doesn't say there's any limit on how often you can try to cloak or use sneak attack, or use any of these features as you'll see in a minute. To me, that means you can either use these things whenever you want, which would be pretty awesome, or you can use them once, or a number of times equal to your level, or equal to some other prominent number on your sheet before needing to recharge with rest or spending points to regain them. So please, lend me your speculation on how these class features might work down in the comments, while we move into subclass features that somehow seem both more and less well-defined. The subclass card indicates that their spellcasting stat is agility. Interesting, and it also comes with two features. Dark Cloud. Make a spellcasting roll, 12. On a success, create a temporary dark cloud that covers any area within close distance of you. Anyone in this cloud can't see out of it, and anyone outside of it can't see in. You are considered cloaked from any enemy it blocks line of sight from. And Slippery. You may spend hope to immediately slip out of anything that is physically keeping you from moving. That second one is super simple, and I love that for rogues. The first one is slightly crunchy, but it looks like you roll against a static DC to cast, then being in the cloud automatically cloaks you for cohesion with your other rogue abilities. What's interesting to me is that Dark Cloud uses terms like temporary and close distance, instead of defining specific spell durations, ranges, and areas of effect, while also bringing up line of sight again. So it seems like we're using general ranges instead of 5-foot squares, which I like, but still using line of sight for some tactical positioning. And we can only guess that temporary and close and a spell's general area of effect are all defined elsewhere for the GM to reference. Last part of character customization, we have domains, which seem to work a lot like feats, but also spells. We know from the article that the characters choose 2 domain abilities at the start and can gain more when they level up, with up to 5 domains active at one time. And if you caught it, that statement confirms Daggerheart uses character levels, but there's no mention yet of XP, so I'm guessing it's milestone or story-based because that would make the most sense for Critical Role. But on that note, they did not comment to the journalist about whether or not Daggerheart would ever replace D&D as their main show. We will see. Anyway, this character has the domain spell Rain of Blades, which spends hope to conjure throwing knives, and the rest is cut off in the photo, and the domain ability Deft Deceiver, which allows you to spend stress to get advantage on a roll to deceive someone. So, what is stress? Well, I know from the article that you sometimes mark stress instead of taking damage, and I'll explain when that happens in a second, but as far as I could tell, I couldn't find anything explaining what happens when you build up so many points of stress. So that's another thing we'll have to figure out later. Damage and hit points, on the other hand, were pretty well explained and are very interesting. Let's check out that sheet again. This character's daggers do 2d12 damage. Sounds a little overpowered, right? Wrong. You roll that damage against your target's minor damage threshold. For example, this character's minor damage threshold is 9. So if the damage roll were under 9, they would mark stress instead of losing HP. If it's over 9 but doesn't exceed their major threshold, they mark 1 HP. If it's over their major threshold but doesn't exceed their severe threshold, they take 2 HP, and if it's severe, they take 3 HP. Saying that out loud sounds kinda complicated, but for me, just looking at the sheet with the 3 thresholds laid out makes it very easy to understand. But tell me what you think about this little HP subsystem in the comments, and if you're caught up on just how little those HP numbers seem, only 1, 2, and 3 hit points. These characters only had 6 total HP, but obviously those 6 hit points could account for several attacks using this system. Where Daggerheart gets even more interesting and tactical is how armor works. Now I'm not certain about this, but it seems like Daggerheart has no armor class. I assume you have to roll against something to hit because we already know that rolling with hope in combat affects initiative and such, but we do know that armor was described in the article as a damage reduction mechanic. As you can see on this sheet, light armor has a score of 3, meaning this character can reduce incoming damage by 3 points when they're attacked, and hopefully that reduction could lower the damage from severe to major, or major to minor, or minor to only marking stress instead of any hit points. Apparently, you can do that armor damage reduction up to 3 times and repair your armor during a short rest. Admittedly, this approach to attacks and damage does read as being more complex than just rolling to hit, rolling damage, and subtracting that damage from your hit points. However, it seems like this approach will allow for more hits on your turn and more damage dice rolls, and we all know that more hits than misses and more dice than fewer dice means more fun. And unlike D&D, character death is actually a thing that can happen. From the article, finally we should mention the death mechanic of Daggerheart, which is a lot more meaningful than what we've seen in games like Dungeons & Dragons. When a player runs out of hit points, they have 3 options. They can choose to die in a blaze of glory with an automatic critical success on their final action. They can choose to become scarred and permanently remove one of their hope slots to recover, or they can risk it all by rolling their hope and fear dice and letting the dice determine their fate. If the hope dice is higher, their character recovers, but if the fear dice is higher, they die. The lead designer mentioned that there's only one resurrection spell in Daggerheart and that it's a one-off ability, so it seems like death will have a higher impact and stakes than in other fantasy TTRPGs. Honestly, I love those options. Auto crit on one action as you die sounds like something I want to homebrew into my games immediately, and rolling with a 50-50 shot of life or death is basically something I was already considering doing, but specifically, I was thinking about the 50-50 shot as another way to use the cool coins that I've homebrewed into my game. One other detail from the article describes how the game master of this playtest, who was the lead designer of the game by the way, asked the players to fill in descriptions about the town they explored, the monsters they fought, and how Daggerheart truly made, quote, the GM and players equal partners in the storytelling. But that's also something that could have just been the GM's personal style. I've run several sessions of D&D where I asked players to make decisions about their locale, their enemies, etc. And it's always a ton of fun. So it'll be interesting to see if this more equal and more genuine form of collaborative storytelling is really built into Daggerheart any more than it's already an option in D&D. My hopes are that when the Daggerheart rulebook comes out, they don't make it super redundant and contain all the same information that's already on the cards. That way, we might actually get a digest-size rulebook, or at least one that's under 200 pages for once. I also hope the cards come with the rulebook and do not have to be sold separately, and whether sold separately or not, I hope they make a dice box that contains like 5 or 6 pairs of hope and fear dice, because that would be way more convenient than having to pull out D12s from a bunch of different dice sets. And my overall impression is that Daggerheart could easily go toe-to-toe with Pathfinder and even D&D in terms of what the game offers. A high fantasy, role-playing game experience with powerful, customizable characters and dice mechanics. It'll never beat D&D in name recognition, but it already feels like something I want to play because it sounds like a slightly more rules-light version of D&D 5e with easier character creation based on switching out a few cards, and more firmly built-in collaboration with how easy it is to gain and share advantage on dice rolls. But I beg of you, tell me in the comments, what do you think of Daggerheart based on everything we know so far? The core mechanic, the stats, advantage, classes, ancestries, damage, hit points. There's already so much to talk about, and I will do my best to reply to any questions. Then, if you're interested in the idea of players controlling more of the story, you should absolutely check out this video on how the players are the ones who balance combat encounters all the time. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your game group, subscribe for more, and consider joining Patreon to directly support what I do. But in any form, thank you for your support, and keep building. And I hope everyone liked my slideshow.